If you like our content about training, then you'll love our programming too. Head to the notes below to grab a free week of general physical preparation. You get unlimited access to me and fresh programming every single week for less than $1 a day.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Hyperformance podcast. I'm not joined by my loyal co-host today, Jacob Mosqueda. He's in the trenches on the gym floor. He couldn't get out of the work shift, but we got to respect that, trying to do the thing. I'm joined today by our esteemed guest, Greg Hawthorne, Thorne Training and Therapy. Welcome to the show, mate.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's good seeing you again.
Absolutely. So me and Greg have hung out, slung a few beers together. Greg, actually, he came to my seminar in Florida. I don't know. I probably told you when we were on the beers later that night, but when I saw your name come up in the people who purchased the tickets, I didn't have a panic attack because I'm confident that I have valuable stuff to talk about, but I was just like, oh, fuck. I just felt so much imposter syndrome. But let's talk about why I put you on such a pedestal. Can you introduce yourself to the listeners? How'd you get into training? Were you a big sporting kid back in the day? Are you the classic failed athlete? Oh, fuck that. Oh, such a backhanded thing to say.
Definitely. I know. It's completely that way. I mean, that's just how it is. Especially so I'm an athletic trainer by trade, right? And most of
you're not in the NBA.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I wouldn't be on this podcast if I was, right? No, it's for sure. No, I'm an athletic trainer by trade, from a licensing standpoint. That's like a physio, like an athletic physio. I don't know how y'all have it over there, but workforce medicine for the most part, right? Mostly we're dealing with athletes. Coming up, I was in school. In high school, I was playing a lot of sports, and then pretty much all sports I possibly could. And then come my senior year in high school, I ended up with a heart condition or something like that. So I had to stop playing the sports I was good at, which is the big guy sports. Like football, I had to stop playing football, I had to stop wrestling. And so I did athletic training to stay on the field as part of in high school, actually. So they was oh, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to be a doctor. So I'll use this to be an orthopedic surgeon. And so then I go up to school, and then as I'm going through school, I realized I really enjoyed it. And so that kind of set me off where I was. But then so that got me into working with multiple sports teams. So I went to the University of Michigan, worked with Michigan State, worked with 3 NFL teams, then worked with the Department of Defense on top of that. And then now I have my own private practice, and I run I work with a basketball gym one step away, and we work with kids now. So I'm primarily with kids with a private practice. And then I help educate things. So from there, again, my education experience got to go from there. Yeah, what's up? You're laughing a lot.
How old are you?
41.
Yeah, so you've fucking been around. Jesus, because that was a lot in a short space of time.
No, it's I've had years of experiences. Yeah, no, I'm 41. So, yeah, I've experienced stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. So I'm on this sort of S&C kick right now. We do have sort of a lot of people who are just obsessed with lifting weights. But one of the things that I think we sort of share that has been really, really impactful for me, not just in the way I lift weights, but then also using the weight room to try to get transference to people who have goals that exist outside of the weight room, is having a view of human movement that sort of comes from outside of the weight room, or that sort of crosses over between both. Because from my perspective, as someone who didn't really start thinking about human movement until I stepped into the weight room, I feel like we get this really weight room oriented view of what human movement is. But it can be so much more than that. But then I think when a lot of meatheads, or even people who just want to do athletic shit, when they start to hear things like breathing and gait and ideas that are associated with that, they start to tune out. But I've found a lot of value in that stuff. I'm sort of curious to what your perspective is, just talking about different views of human movement and how these ideas like breathing and gait, which might not seem immediately like these high performance human movement concepts, what sort of value there could be in exploring them.
Yeah, so for sure. So when it came to me, I was always not some conceited or backhand or anything like that. I was always fairly strong, just coming up. As a kid, I was always the strong kid in class, but I couldn't run. I was always a little heavier, things like this. My general base started with weight loss and movement, and then it became rehab based, and then it became strength based after that. It was this whole reverse thing. And but it's always about performance more than like weight room numbers, was always where my mind was when it came to like, all right, the goal is to get better at what the thing you want to do, right? If you want to lift weights, and that's the thing you want to do, but because as an athletic trainer, it was always a different sport. It was the thing to do. My thought process went differently there, and so that led me down a different path. And like again, I got started with kind of the gate breathing thing. Later on, after I've like had some failed experiences, if you will, it was a big osteopathic background, but then I got a PRI. And that stuff worked pretty well from rehab standpoint. But then when the transfer to performance was a little off, if you will, like it was actually worked really well as like, hey, we're doing early stage rehab. We're trying to get you back. We're trying to get some of the and the general concept I thought felt really well with the left-sidedness, right-sidedness versus left-sidedness, and like getting things. Hey, we don't have to work the body symmetrically to make things work. And so
just quickly for listeners as well. I'm so sorry to cut you off. Can you just give us a quick what is PRI for someone's like, what the hell does that mean? Just the elevator pitch.
So yeah, so the Posture Restoration Institute is a essentially an education group, if you will, started by Ron Fresca out of Lincoln, Nebraska, in the United States.
And he's got an osteo background, right? Like the idea of, because osteopathy to me means like into integration, like.
Mm-hmm. And that's what got me into, because in grad school we did osteopathic. Like I had an osteopathic background in grad school, so we did a lot of muscle energy techniques and taught a lot of Greenman stuff and AT stills and all these other things. And so that was where the focus kind of went. I went there, but then I saw there was gaps, like it was missing things. Like I had surgeries, and it's like, okay, well, I'm already messed up. So, and then I had kids, and my kids were like, they're moving differently. I'm like, so how is this one size fits all algorithm going to work? And it at certain times. So I was like, where are we missing gaps, right? So then that got me into like Zach Couples, and then Zach led me to Bill Hartman. And so that got heavy with Bill Hartman because it was more of a understanding of everything. But this helps from a breathing gait cycle thing, which you're talking about over there. It just kind of helps both these kind of organizations, these educational groups, both Bill and like PRI, they have a heavy influence on appreciating the movement of gait, because what makes humans special, essentially, from other animals is the fact that we walk on two legs regularly, can swing, have arms and thumbs. So it's just understanding that our body is different than other things. So it may be important that we focus and we kind of, okay, this is how we work as a human being, kind of help push everything together. Most sports are bipedal or mobile. And so it makes sense to put those in place, and then appreciating how we go through the different phases, or how the lung and breath is integrated into that has been very useful in regards to helping bias and understanding the things I'm doing in the gym, right? It's like, oh, we're squatting. It's like, what does this mean? We're lunging. What does this mean? What does this mean? How does it bias certain movement strategies and types? And how will it potentially transfer to sport? And like, that's really comes down to in performance.
I think you highlighted like sort of how I view PRI quite well as well. There's so many really useful concepts in there, but then if you're not willing to adapt it to your own context, especially if you're not working in that really early rehab setting, it's probably going to leave you wanting a bit more. Or some people like very confused about like, what the fuck even could the application of this stuff be to more advanced rehab or even performance? As a strength coach, what I immediately got out of even just pure PRI, because I sort of had a similar sort of path, discovering this breathing and gait lens sort of through PRI adjacent strength coaches, and then sort of trickling down into that Bill Hartman world. And I think there's some considerable overlap with their models. But again, I think the compression expansion stuff, and especially the way it's discussed and the coaches that sort of drink that Kool-Aid, it's a bit more readily adaptable to strength training. Having said that, I love that something I got from PRI was this idea of using the ground, and that there sort of just is this innate progression from the ground up to human movement when you're regressing and progressing it. And like the same way that my understanding of how a baby goes from like not even being able to upright itself up off the ground, and then goes on this journey to bipedal locomotion, obviously through rolling into crawling and stuff like that. But that's applicable to strength training in terms of making it easier for someone to squat, because squatting with a barbell on your back, even if we don't consider the load, we've got your arms tied up so you can't use them for balance, that you're not touching many things. It's actually depending on where you're at, quite an advanced movement proprioceptively and coordinatively. Having said that, if you take them through the baby stages, it's like literally put them down on all fours and see if they can put their butt on their ankles. Because it's this whole idea of, sorry for just going on a big fucking rant, I think there's this concept of like falling in humans that governs a lot of our autonomic nervous system's response and reflexes to movement, that PRI just opens this Pandora's box. Like, there's so much shit going on that you weren't paying attention to in terms of that. Can you talk about that? Like,
to a certain point, yeah, because like, I mean, like, here's like, I know you just said like, oh, you know, the back squat and PRI was like talking about coming on up. And one of the things is like, before I even knew about PRI, and I was like this within the sports world, I was in, like, we started moving away from back squats like way before I even heard about these things. In regards to like, it's not the end all be all. Like, you don't have to go here. It's like, again, this is where like the lens was performance, not weight room. And so I was like, hey, look. If you can't like go a squat and you can't front, like we're gonna do safety bar, we're gonna do some surgery, we're gonna do some front, some goblets, we're gonna do something else. It's like, what's the point? Because we're dealing with guys who they're stiff as hell, and it's like I don't need to put a bar on the back and squat per se. If it was like quarterbacks, we had like the different throwers, and like they would just move away from because like there was no point. And so this is before even the PRI thing. We're moving away from those and straight bar deadlifts already, and it's like this is way back before I even heard of PRI. And so it's not like it's a PRI thing. You know, within our, I think this world that this little town that became a thing. But like it was like, all right, we're realizing that we have machines, we have these other things. It's like, what's the point of putting them in? Because people get hurt. It's not a bad name. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I mean, there's bad strength coaches out there where people get disc issues and things like this. And it's like, even again, I'm coming from the rehab side of things like early on. And it was like, oh, why you put this, why back squat? Like, just do this instead. Like, why are we even doing these things? And then certain coaches had start transitioning. Again, this is before I even heard of all this. So it wasn't like a PRI thing. It was something that was already happening. And it just, or even a build thing, right? It's just a thing. And I'm not against back squats. Neither is, it just depends on when and where and why. It's like, you just don't have to do it. Like, if you don't have the back squat, you don't have to not, like, you also shouldn't say you should never back squat. It depends.
I know you work with powerlifters.
Very for my movement.
Like, I know, and like Kelly Man, Perform Motion, and you're not telling them to not back squat.
No, it's like that's the goal. It's like your goal is there. It's like you're good at it, and you're good. It's like it's definitely a great way to build strength. There's no doubt. Like, I mean, you got to be strong and stiff.
It's a great way to stiffen someone as well.
People aren't there yet. Yes, that is the point of the back squat, is to stiffen someone. Like, that is why I'm going to back squat someone, to make them stiffer. Like, in a good way. In a good way. Right? A very controlled descent. Right? It's like, you know, it's meant to be done in a very specific way. And this one, I think Sean had I'm working with Sean Astorga as well. Shout out Sean Astorga. And he was like, he has that Smith machine that kind of goes up and down and side to side. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like the smooth. Like, that's like one of my favorite machines because it takes away some of the balance out of it. And it's like you're just there and you can do, but you still move like a human, and it doesn't lock you in. But like, there's things like that. But like, so that kind of goes, I guess, into like the idea of the ground up in regards to like, it's just focusing on the individual and figuring out what they need to get them to the path they need to the fastest with the least resistance, right? If you start something on the ground, you can learn to move on the ground. Once again, how many people have we seen like, this is not just PRI stuff. We look at taking it back old school. Individuals, like, how do you find your squat technique? You get on all four baby technique, and then you kind of rock back until you feel like people say, oh, rock back, move your knees, and then you do like the quadrupeds into your hips thing to find your squat stance. Well, that's starting from the ground up to figuring things out. That's the same idea. Now that was very arbitrary, but if people are already doing it, be like, way back in the day, it's like powerlifts and stuff like this.
Yeah, you don't have to know about PRI, right? And it's like, it's just to get that.
Correct. And that's what I'm saying. When people see these things, they're like, oh, PRI, you do PRI. Like, no, it just fucking makes sense. Like, it's not like, but because there's a label on it now, all of a sudden it becomes, terrible, right? And so, no, but from the ground up, it makes sense because it puts you in a position to feel things a lot more. You get a lot more support, and you can find, like, from a sensory standpoint, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Cool. So now when I stand up, it doesn't feel like this. I feel here. It's like, we're probably doing it wrong then. So what can I do to make you feel better? It's like, okay, like you said, you learn from the ground up. Post-surgical, you do things from the ground up, right? If you have a stroke, you do things from the ground up. It's just this growth change over time, and it's natural for the curve. If you're doing a new movement, a completely new movement, it's best like, hey, can you feel it first from a position of safety where you're not constantly balancing yourself, fighting yourself? Can you just feel, okay, now that you're comfortable there, let's move you to more load, more gravity, because as you stand up from the ground, and it's like completely rambling on, but as you move to the ground again, you're just having to fight gravity a little bit more. As you have your hands off of things, you fight gravity a little bit more. and there's a time and place for all those things. But it makes sense again. Like bridges and glute bridges and all those are ground-based exercises that help drive certain posterior movements, but they're used to never in sports as like a primary, but they're used to feel all the things and get things moving in the right direction. It's just when are you doing it, how you reference it.
Yeah, because I think that's been the issue with people speaking past each other. There's been like this reaction. It's just like, oh, PRI people or compression expansion influence coaches hate back squats. But it's like, no, it's all these people who are working in sports performance with this purely weight room oriented lens for human movement. And they're like, we're squatting, therefore the end goal is back squatting. That's the end of our progression. Where it's just like, well, no, the end goal is not to back squat. The end goal isn't even a squat. We might use a squat to drive a variety of outcomes. We can use a back squat to stiffen someone up and build quad strength. But then what I took from a lot of this compression expansion sort of lens is like, again, they even define a squat quite differently. Or I would say everyone else's definition of a squat is quite vague or specific to their niche, whereas they did try to come up with this, like, we're just going to try to distinguish it as a movement pattern in general. But it led me to thinking about the squat in not even just, this is a general tool for leg strengthening, but there's other qualities I can use to drive with this movement, depending on what sort of a squat that I do. Some of the things that I've come to associate more with the squat pattern is this idea of yielding, developing some eccentric qualities. Also, like, it's one of my favorite mobilizing exercises just to drive a lot of flexion and relaxation in the system. This concept of a squatty squat. What are your thoughts on the squatty squat?
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. I just wanted to take a second to let you know that Angus has poured all of his knowledge on e-commerce and organic content into an ebook, which is now available. If you want to check it out, head to the show notes or the link in Angus's bio. Thanks.
Some people have more squat than others, and some of us aren't going to be very good at it. Like, I've never been a squatter. Squatting has always been,
You wouldn't have a very squatty squat, would you?
No, yes. So, like, I have a bias, whatever. But, like, I've always wanted a good squat because, like, I've never been good at squat. Like, I would never put my quads in a squat. Like, I never, ever, like, coming on up from high school all the way up, never felt good in a squat. And I would try to force it. When I did, I actually start getting some pains and very uncomfortable because I was trying to force positions that probably shouldn't be in. Again, I'm a very, from the archetype standpoint, we'll talk, we hit on that. There's, people are built differently, put it that way. And my frame and my build isn't necessarily designed to go squat. Really long legs, shorter torso, really wide pelvis, really wide rib cage. I'm just
You're
wide
built
dude.
like a Samoan.
I hit like crazy. Yeah, I'm built really wide.
Big flat feet.
My squat is very hingy looking. It's always been. But if you can squat well, it does drive certain qualities, right? I do think utilizing a squat with the appropriate load, appropriate assist, it's more the movement. So let's think of it as a movement, if you will. The ability to go vertically up and down and transition and let your pelvic floor drop and rise at the same time as you're moving through and your joints moving. It is a fantastic activity to work on yielding with lighter weights. And then because of the activity is biased towards that, when you load it up, it works on your ability to resist that as well. So you can manipulate that movement to make it harder or easier to do these certain things, right? So how can I, so like it depends on how you want to use it. So you can goblet squat, you can do like a recline squat. You can front squat people sometimes with a certain load. Once you have a certain load, things start. The harder it is, the slower, the less you're going to, relax in that position or yield. But because that position is set up, your ability to move through it with heavy load is a testament to your ability to control your accessory system. And so if you can maintain a pretty fairly squat under heavy load, you're probably have a pretty strong core, automatic. Your pelvic floor relaxes in and out like it's supposed to, and you probably have pretty good integration of your system. So it's a fantastic modality from whatever perspective you want to utilize it as. It's just some people, the key is everybody shouldn't look the same, right? And is there wrong ways to do it? Yes, I would say there are some ways that aren't good. If your goal is, hey, I just want to push my knees out really wide and squat all day, okay, then that's your goal, but don't tell me it's going to do something else, right? But I wouldn't say it's the best option. Nor would I say, again, for most people, it's probably a poor option, and honestly, at least it has diminishing returns. It's a quick fix and a quick cheat that has diminishing returns. I'm the king of diminishing returns when it comes to when I first started powerlifting. It was just move as much weight as possible. Now,
yeah,
I had a plateau. My deadlift because it was so fucking hingy. All right, so round it back. I mean, it's crazy shit of it. But it's like, so I was like, oh, I realized I'm pretty weak. I mean, it was over 600, but it was still not. I wanted to hit 8, but I couldn't get 8 because it was. Anyways, so the point of diminishing returns, but the squat is fantastic in regards, like you're saying. I like to use it as a way to manage the ability to move vertically. To put it simply.
And because that is the thing that gets lost when you look at squats as purely, I guess, from the quantitative perspective, how much weight do we get on the bar? And especially when you have a head coach to impress, he maybe doesn't understand some of the qualitative aspects of the squat. But that's one of the things, again, that I've sort of taken from it, especially when I'm looking at using exercises to develop qualities. It's like, again, why have I got them squatting? Yeah, leg strength and all those reasons, but also working on that ability to vertically translate a pelvis and to maintain that bouncy sort of yielding quality to it. Whereas there is this certain amount of weight that you put on people, especially with a lot of barbell squats, where the qualities of it sort of change. It goes from this like attacking and bouncing out of the hole to this hesitancy. The depth changes, maybe the torso angle changes a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sort of interested. I want to ask you a question. Is a back squat a hinge or a squat?
And so, like, in my
your
opinion, it depends on the load. Like, yeah, and I think it depends on the load, because you can have people who can squat a back squat. Now, like, when you start going heavy, I know the heavier you get, it should be a squat still. Like, a squat's the idea to make it squat, right? But most people hinge the shit out of it. In regards to, like, if that's what we're looking at, like, most people are driving the same quality as they would get from a deadlift or good morning. And it's like, well, just pick one. Don't do them both. And just adjust your squat to make it to, if you want the quality, like, say, what quality are you going for? If you're just going for pure strength and like, hey, can I stop movement? Can I, again, just get stiff, right? And my goal is just get stiff as shit, right? It doesn't matter technically how it looks to a certain extent. Like, if it hinges, you hinge it. But in understanding, like, you're just learning how to hinge from different areas of load. So it's useful from that perspective, but you're not going. You probably get the same benefit from deadlifting. I'm gonna make a point from this. I keep my squats usually fairly light, with a focus on with my athletes, which are basketball players, and we do like front squats, we'll do safety bar squats, we'll do zerchers. I don't back squat, but I know they have to back squat at their high schools that they go to, and so we'll learn a back squat. But I don't load it up. Like, that's not my load comes from the deadlifts. I do trap bar deadlifts for load, which looks very similar to most squats in high school because I do trap bar. So I have a kid, and we didn't touch. Kid's good, don't get me wrong, but he lives with me, and a good basketball player. His deadlift, we got his deadlift up. He's like 165. We got his trap bar. Once we hit 405, I was like, I don't need any more. You're a basketball player. He had 405, so we kind of stayed there. I didn't go above 275 in a squat, and we back squatted because it was up to season. So we were doing nothing but other squats. 4 weeks, the month before he started working with school, we back squatted, and we went no more than 275, and it was like, had a little decent. He had like 21 day. I'm like, all right, I'm definitely probably underloading him potentially, but he goes to the gym and he hits 405 for 2, right? And we didn't touch anything like that other than within the deadlift. So it's like, I know it's a hingy squat, but like, when we're looking at it, most gym numbers, people say like, oh, it was close enough parallel, that'll count as a squat. And I mean, it's wider and things like this, but he was hit 405 in a back squat without ever touching anything close to that. Because again, we deadlifted for our strength, but it's so just like, you're driving the same quality. So I was like, what do you want to do? We use other things to drive the squat, because I knew it was like, there's no point in doubling down on the same movement, because that's essentially what's going to happen with most kids or most people when they start going heavy.
Yeah, because that's it as well. I think there's a lot of trainers who appreciate this sort of movement lens that get too worried about this idea of compensation. But that's one of your athletes like leveraging compensation. Is like, oh, the coach here is saying squat, but like, I'm just going to deadlift the fuck out of this with the bar on my back to get the big number when it suits me.
And the goal is to move weight. Like I said, most back squats and most people is about moving weight, period. And I'm not moving weight, terrible squatting.
Yeah. What's the go with that semicircle divided into 3 sort of sections? So sometimes it gets talked about as a propulsion arc. Some people talk about it as a limb arc model. It's sort of got ER, IR, ER. For anyone who's watching the YouTube, we'll get it to come up on the screen right now. What the hell does that mean? How is that sort of useful? Or can you sort of talk about, do you view propulsion in 3 phases? Is it an aspect of the model that you find yourself considering a lot, or using it to break down or categorize movements, to whether they emphasize a certain part of the arc?
So I definitely view movement, and generally most exercise activities I look at as a early, late, or like a middle type bias. Like that's how I program. Like use with that thought in mind, be it like upper body, lower body, whatever it is. So I do think about that. The arc, though, I will say, like as I was taught it early on, like this comes like a Bill Hartman thing. It was slightly off, but like the general idea was like appreciating that. And this is through article Newman was a big one for that. So like Newman, I think. In this book, you talk about how the hips change your angles as you move. So like external rotators become internal rotators, and then come back to essentially external rotator from there. And we're looking at the movements and things like this. When we're going through those phases, you're going to have this ER to IR to ER again movement, because that's how all movement is. But it's less of an arc. But when you look at the arc, I know it's like 060 to 120, 120 to above, how do you want to do it? And some people skew it down maybe 10 degrees based on the fact of anatomical constraints. It still helps kind of understand and appreciate things early on. Right?
I mean, it's a literal fucking semicircle. Sure. It's gonna miss some nuance.
If you go in thinking like, oh, this is the end all, it's like, oh, it's literally just a semicircle. So like, there's more nuance to it, but like taking appreciation, like, yeah, you're gonna have this thing. The question is, where are you starting on that arc? The arc is always there. The key is to appreciate, like, I can make that arc smaller. I can make that arc instead of 0 to 120. I can make that arc only 30 degrees, right? And that was like, and it's gonna be biased. And when you have archetype, now you're gonna bias where you have the ERs and IRs, but you're going to have those ERs and IRs no matter what, just how big and how small it is.
So I have a question. So would you say that there's a lot more truth in this idea that this triphasic nature to movement, more so than this sort of total arc thing?
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Whereas the arc gives people this idea that it's always 180
for rehab. Like the general idea for rehab was like, oh, can we get relative motion back on activity? So it's like, oh, if I'm going to put you in a position on the ground, not in a squat, unless it's a light squat, right? And I can move. And like people will post pictures and shit online, like, oh, look, they're at the bottom of the squat, but the knees are far as forward, like because they're fucking bending and yielding, right? They're not actually going through this arc. Like, and that is key. You understand that's not what you're doing. Your knees don't come back at the bottom of the squat. You're stop mid zone. You're stretching everything out. So you can bounce out of it. Just using connective tissues.
Because I think that this is the point of confusion as well. Because my idea of what that bottom ER is typically describing is, again, like more of like, the way they squat in yoga with like knees back towards the chest. And it's like, you really only see that squat in what I view as like a pretty yielding squat and a yielding strategy. You can't really do that with much load on you, because that's the whole point. It's like, it's a very big yielding strategy. The one place I do see it though, under load, every now and then a snatch. To save it, to get rock bottom, they've fucked it, and they just need to keep trying to find a way to descend lower somehow. But often they will get spat out the back.
Yeah, you don't see the knees come back, but their knees come back like outside of their body, right? It's not like their knees are like their knees don't come back; they go back. Like it's not their knees; it's there because the force of I gotta catch it, just jams them down, so everything springs down and back. Like it is, you're right, it's the same. But the knees are crazy and turned in, feet are turned out. So it's not even the same thing, because if we're looking at the arcs have now been spread out, right? And now again, this is where it comes down to. So you're not even gonna see it there, but appreciating this is where it comes down to it. If you took one part of this model from Bill and like, well, not you, but like in general, this arc, right? And then said, oh, this is what it is. It's still fucking ER, right? It's just not through the relative motions. Like it's still an expansion. You're still moving back. Like, so even if you're at the bottom of the squat, you're still ERing. It's just how are you ERing, right? How are you creating this ER? And in some way, shape, or form through a yield through connective tissues where you're not getting relative motion, but your system is still moving back through a yield of the connective tissues or a yield through the spine, hence disc issues when some people hit these bottom spots. It's still an ER strategy. It's just how it's
compensated as shit.
So it's like, it is always, so the arc stays pretty true. Just take the numbers out. You gotta take the numbers out. And that's the whole thing is like, the big thing is like, if you're standing up, you're not moving, you're IR, right? You have to stand up. If you look at the gait research, if you look at public research, when I stand, technically is what we want. my pelvis, my spine sits behind my center of gravity, my hips. So we get the IR, we get nutation, automatic. It happens because that's just how it is. Look at Don Tigney and all that other shit on and looking up. And so like when I'm standing, I have that. How do I move out of there without hitting back? I have to ER to get my pelvis resituated. So the first start be ER, but I drop out to start moving because if I don't ER, I don't move. I have to have some ER to move, so I have to move into it. But then as we drop down now, we're going to find the yield. Like we're consistently yielding a lot more. But again, it's that much, right? If I have a heavy load on my back, I still have to ER a little bit, some way, shape, or form because I have to move. And once I hit stopping parts, right? Do I slow down or don't slow down? Like if I just bottom out, I skip the whole IR phase, if you will. If I just, see people kind of just drop their butt down when they squat, right? They'll go to squat and then
Pat Davidson nails this.
Tuck underneath.
Those skinny plies.
Able to stop themselves.
Yeah, they can get to the bottom of a squat and they can pause there all day, but it murders them if you make them pause in the middle. They die.
They just can't. They can't do it. And it's like, in order to get out of it, it's like this little. I'm gonna roll all the way forward. Their butt's gonna kind of come up. And it's like because they can't push. They can't IR from there, right? And it's like they don't have any IR there. And so that's where it comes down to. Is like it's just the arc is useful in regards to appreciating. If you take it from gait, take weightlifting out of it to put it on a table, it's like that's what it's for. And then as you put more load, that arc gets smaller, much smaller. IR drop off, ER drop off. Especially ER is faster.
Probably a good time to discuss that when you say ER, and often when I say ER, it means something probably a bit more broad than how people typically think about ER as this purely transverse plane movement. Or maybe I'm not sure if this is your opinion. Do you think that all movement is in the transverse plane? This is something that comes up a lot as well when people are going down this rabbit hole. So what is ER? What's the nature of triplanar movement?
So I can't take credit for any of this in regards to like how I'm talking about ER and R. This is a Bill Hartman thing. And I'd give him a shout out if you're interested, because he has been very influential on me. Like he has a UHP model. Network now, we can have access to some of this stuff. Like before, it wasn't there. Now we have some. It's still a little tricky to fully grasp it, how it's put out without making the intensive. But again, it's getting better. So I do say I recommend that. But like how I look at ER and R is a general quality. Is essentially you can look at the expansion compression model. People say it. That's not what Bill calls it. So understand that. But I think it's useful to talk about and use those words. And so it's like essentially ER. Yes, ER is external rotation, like we can think of, like you normally think of anatomically standard. But because our motion is essentially transverse motion, because there are zero muscles in your body that are completely linear, right? There's zero joints that are completely flat. So nothing moves in a straight plane sagitally. Everything has to twist and turn on each other to create movement. So everything technically would be an internal rotation, external rotation within the transverse plane. And so essentially ER is broken into both flexion and abduction. So ER, flexion, and abduction kind of are general expansive qualities, if you will. And then IR is adduction, interrotation, and extension. And it's, you want to think about like pushing into the ground. Like IR is going to be forcing to the ground. I'm moving towards the ground. Things are pushing in the ground. And ER is moving away from the ground. Like if you think about abduction, the thing we just talked about, they all make sense. And because of the muscles not ever having any linear attachments, the joints, no joints flat, it appreciates like, okay, this is how things turn and move. And because we're moving away from ground, we think that's expansive, right? I'm getting away from ground. I'm not putting force. I'm getting less dense. All these different terms to kind of understand it. But the key is like moving up and away, right? And that can be any way, shape, or any way possible. However I do it is just understanding how you're doing it. And it's like you're doing it either through a bunch of help, you're dispersing it through a bunch of different joints or lots of motion, or you're using one little location to create space. And that becomes compensatory. And it's like appreciate how you're doing it, then helps you choose the best options for someone to do what they need to do. Sometimes being stiff is very useful. Sometimes having the orientations is very useful, especially if you're like, you do circus and leg or you're a gymnast. You may want these things. You want to have these. You only need enough of the other stuff or be able to compensate enough of the other stuff. But that's where intelligent training comes into play. So people are good at niching down in certain sports because it's less sciencey and more like, oh, I understand how these people need to move. And it's like, it works this way. But like understanding a model helps you understand and appreciate that. Helps you maybe get better at that and helps you be a little bit more flexible and be like, oh, I can transition over here because now I know they're not football players. I know they're not rugby players. I know they're not doing these things. I know they don't need the same thing. And so now I can make the adjustment and move and appreciate, okay, this people require this.
That
makes sense.
Yeah, and talking about viewing movement as something that's individual, something about this model that gets criticized, I think quite unfairly, is this idea of wides versus narrows. I understand the criticism because I think the way that some coaches talk about it is so limiting to the athletes when they hear that and the coaches maybe, but I think what's actually being said is it's like wides and narrows, it's not boxes and it's not a complete identity or restriction for an athlete. It's a spectrum that we can appreciate and overlay onto every other variable that makes someone a complete human. It's like the same way that they're a soccer player. That doesn't tell us all their information. The angle of their ribcage doesn't give us all the information either. Having said that, for one measurement, fuck me. Like it's crazy the insight and how much, because again, it's confirmation bias. If you just, you shouldn't just assume it's like, oh yeah, I've stuck my thumbs in this person's rib cage. I can therefore assume every behavior that I'm going to see from them in every, but it's like, I'm always shocked at how much people adhere to these stereotypes, the wider and the narrower they get.
Awesome. Like it is, this is why I found it great. And this is literally how I got into this. I didn't know about these archetypes. Again, like this is where experience life. Like being 41, you start experiencing things, you start seeing shit, right? And it's like, you know what I mean? And so I have kids, and I'm a wide, and my whole family's wide. My wife, she's a narrow. She played tennis. She was fast, you know, things like that. And my kids came out. My daughters are wide, and my son's a narrow. And developmentally, they were completely, and I'm like, all right, this is where I was like, all right, the karate thing, I like it, but it doesn't account for this right here. This doesn't add up. And this is why I got into Bill, because this is what actually led me down to, was this archetype thing, without knowing it was there. Zach told me about it. And he's mentioned it. I'm like, hey, do you know, can I ask him a question? I said, hey, do you notice like the difference between like people's shapes and like how they move differently? He was like, it's funny you say that. Talk to me after lunch. I'm bringing up after lunch. That's part of the course, right? And that's where it went. And that's what got me really locked in, because like I saw it and I questioned it prior to even knowing about it, right? And it was like my daughter was way stiffer. Like you would see her jump and it was like hard stop. My son, narrow as could be, his ass was his heels. As soon as he'd land, boom, ass hit his heels. She was always way stronger. Like from day one, he always just moved. He started crawling sooner, started walking sooner. No. Yeah, walking sooner, rolling sooner. She was just stiff. But when she stood up, she was strong and could hold herself up better. Like it was just a meet. Like took longer to get there. She was about 3 months behind. But when she was there, she was like, it was like locked in. She didn't move well. Roller skating, my son fucking hated it. My daughter loved it. Riding bikes, my son could go all day. My daughter's legs would gas out super soon. Like it was just all these different confirming things. And they were raised in the same environment. Like we have a farm, so they're outside and doing shit. Like, and I was like, this makes sense. And so without a doubt, the archetype, again, the why, it is a spectrum, but it does hold very true. And I've seen with athletes, like it is a thing that holds very true.
Yeah. And just for anyone who's sort of oblivious to these archetypes, so we're sort of talking about the angle that the two sides of your rib cage make as they meet your sternum.
If you want access to a community of like-minded coaches, head to the notes below and join our free school community. I'm in there every week doing Q&As, and there's plenty of educational content on the way as well.
It's a lot more than that. I would say it's a lot more than that. That's the one thing I will hop on. Like, start by, you can use the measure of the angle to start to understand what they are. But it's not just that, right? It's like you use that as a glean into the structure, right? So you'll measure the angle under their sternum, and it's like 90 plus, 90 less, to keep it simple. But then that also usually goes along with the longer rib torso, longer rib cage. It messes with the pelvis positions. It messes with like their skeletal structure, their eyes. Like even if you look at McGill's research, even McGill, I'm talking to people that say hate on him all the time. You can look at his research. He shows the different spinal looks. Like the big three, whatever. Great for a while.
So is this like cones?
He looked at the shape of the actual lumbar, the vertebrae, right? They change based on their archetype, and it's like because like you go to different places in the world, like good at holding heat. So it's like the I just want to like it's not just the and this is like a nuanced thing. I think people are like it's not just that. That just gives you an idea. It's like okay, their rib cage is their infrasternal angle. And literally what it is, you can Google it, is wider, which means all these other things. Like it's like it's just whole most likely, like I mean, there's genetic factors, but generally as a whole, your shape is now going to have a bias towards spaces in certain spots and not other spots, right? And then that leads to a whole lot of other stuff.
It's funny. I had Alberto Nunez, like legendary natty bodybuilder, and he was talking about if he saw someone's head, he could identify their ability, their bodybuilding potential, and just like, yeah, how it's like if you just see this wide head, and I was like, yeah, yeah,
like because you look at it's crazy because like I've been always I know it's like wow, but like it's not even like a wide and narrow, but like it's science. It's just like we're in the matrix. I'm like we're in the matrix. It's like everything's the same. Like you look at certain people, right? Men, female, whatever. Their head shape and their face. I'm like, oh, they probably have big hips, or it's like if I like you get like they look like this. Like it's like oh they could be your sister, right? But like no, but it's like the structure just shows everything else. Like so like they're all related from some way, shape, or form. So it's like you look at these things and you can tell oh this person's gonna be like this. Yeah. Or it's like it is so common to see like how this works out, no matter what they do.
Because I think
obesity changes things.
Assumptions get really demonized in our field, but there is something to developing the coach's eye when you get just like a room of 20 athletes coming at you at once, just to be able to intuitively sort of group them into buckets and like yous aren't the same person, but like the same squat variant. It's probably going to make your life easier here. Like I think assumptions like that are gold.
100% with group training comes with experience, right? But like again, the more you know, the faster you can get experience. The faster experience is useful, and so it's like the 100%. Like in the group training, honest, I look at people like, okay, you guys, all right, I'm gonna give you a wedge, I'm gonna give you a front load, I'm gonna give you a back. Like it's not even seeing. And then it's like, okay, then I watch them do it, then you coach. But start like picking a better starting line is the best option, right? And it helps you get there, but. Without a doubt, just looking at someone's structure and visually seeing, again, like you said, the wider heads or the narrow heads, like the longer noses, like the shoulders. And it's like, okay, you're probably narrow, you're probably wide. It's like, you're probably going to be better at this, you're probably better at this. I was like, okay, so if we're doing them all the same because I'm forced to it, I got to appreciate that it's not going to look so good and be okay with it. Maybe just keep them light and focus more on this aspect of it instead of that, right? So it's just those sort of appreciations, I think, make you a better coach and it gets you much better results.
I'm not sure if this analogy will make you cringe, but it's the start of another question. If I have a short time to explain the archetypes to someone and the qualities associated with it, typically I just say wide, think stereotypical powerlifter waddling around like a gorilla. For narrow, think stereotypical marathon runner could slip through a narrow crack or something like that. And because my understanding is that like there is also like again, so much more than even just skeletal structure, let alone just the shape of your rib cage, associations with the way your connective tissue might behave, your ability to leverage different energy systems and stuff. Do you agree that if you had to stereotype it maximally, that those are either end of the continuum? Is there any way to sum either of them up?
I think it's each way. The traditional powerlifter, and then your marathon runner. Like those are the like you can use that. I can say, oh, you're Kenyan versus your Samoan. You know, like you can say things like that. You know, like it's the same idea. Whereas like it's yes, and you say the qualities that you said feed into both of those, just like you said, and then it's just how you put it. I think those are the best options. I think if you're conveying that, and the key is,
but we don't usually see them
appreciating. Right. And the kids are appreciating what they're good at, what they're going to struggle at. And then what are their goals? Like, do they have runway to lose some of it or not? And like, or do you like, you need to keep this their superpower. Like once you lose that, you're going to lose it. Like you're going to mess them up from a performance standpoint, right? So it's like, it just gives you information on what you're going, what actions you're going to do or going to do, how they're going to affect them, right? So it doesn't tell you, oh, I shouldn't squat this guy. I shouldn't deadlift this guy. It's going to say, okay, if I deadlift this guy, here are probably the consequences are going to come from that. You know, and it's like appreciating what you're going to get out of it. And if the goals don't match, it's like, all right, let me just throw it out. You don't have to deadlift. Like, it's not a fucking thing. Like, you don't have to do it. Like, there's no world where like, I have to deadlift. Doesn't mean you don't have to bend over and pick up shit off the ground. You just don't got to do it with 300 pounds, right? It's just, there's a big difference. Be like, oh, you should never hinge. You should never round your back. I mean, like, it's the same idea of saying, you know, yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not realistic to loop it like that. But this appreciation, like, you don't have to do it either.
Yeah. Talking about these stereotypes, one of the stereotypes that I understand, but I don't really like when it gets brought up, is the idea that wides cannot rotate, or they cannot thrive in sports that we stereotype as rotation-based sports. Baseball is where I hear this a lot. Oh, I'm fucked. I'm a wide. I won't be able to rotate. I love surfing. Do you know Kelly Slater? Kelly Slater is the GOAT of surfing. He's so flat front to back. And there's a lot of these surfers, a lot of high-level surfers, they kind of surf like powerlifters. They're always in this hingy sort of half squat on the board. But then you get these other more stereotypical surfers who are a little bit more flowy, bouncy, a lot more taller, or ass on the ankles with their movement. So the way I see these wides thriving in surfing is it is a much more like frontal plane, side to side shifting than this may be pure hip and shoulder separation. How do you see wides thriving in rotation-based sports? Or what are your thoughts on this idea that wides don't rotate? Does it look different? Do they actually have potential to rotate?
So this is where it's an appreciation of time. How much time do you have to rotate? How much space do you have to rotate in? And what you're going to thrive in? Like, I look at surfing, like, I don't know anything about surfing now.
Yeah.
I'm a black dude from America, right? And never live on the beach. I'm not going near the water. I can swim. I'm not going to say that stereotype. I can swim. Had to graduate from high school, actually. But, like, you're locked into a board, all right? If you're surfing, like, guess what? The board's not going to rotate. So, so how are you? So you have to rotate. So why do you have it? Like, it's going to move. Like, how the board rotates is how a wide's going to rotate.
Yeah.
So, like, I can, like, they're one with the board, if you will. So, like, it's going to be a big one, and then the whole body can shift around. So, they're going to be stronger that way, right? And then, if we look at baseball, if you're a pitcher, you have all the time in the world to throw the ball. There is no need to, like, go fast. So, I can load and throw. Now, a volleyball player, no fucking wides. Because the space you have to jump and spike the ball, you can be a libero, right? You can be a wide libero. I'll give you that. But front line, no wides, right? Yeah. All the tall people in beach volleyball are narrows. Some of the shorter guys, you centers and things like this, you can be a wide potentially there. Because the speed you need to get around on the ball in the air and jump, you just can't do it as a wide. Like, I want to say not never. Very few, and the person does is delete and they look way different. And you can't coach it. Like, uncoachable. Like, any of the constant things you have are going to be uncoachable because the need to rotate is different, right? But baseball, you have plenty of time to rotate. And, like, as a hitter, all the wides, all the narrows train to be wider as a hitter, technically. Like, what if you will? More pancake is this term. Because you have, again, you can put your feet however you want. And that's why the stances look so different in baseball. But all that matters is you get around. You can do that as a wide. It's a bigger turn, right? It's a wider turn. But because of that, like, there's a ton of power in it. And so, like, it's more of a time constraint on how they do it. You're going to have your outliers, of course, right? But it's like one of those things where they're going to do it because they love it growing up and they've conditioned their body essentially to make the adaptation and they figured it out on their own. Like, if someone's like an older guy like me, or even like someone in their 20s trying to pick up a sport like a wide that's like very like do volleyball, they're going to struggle to be a hitter because it's just their body now is done developing the different, it's just the compensations so that are needed and the growths needed from an anatomical standpoint to actually maintain the level of play, right? There's certain times where it's like things just stop growing like they're supposed to, like they need to create these biases. Like youth development, I'm like, let them do what they do and make sure it's not stupid. Like, make it look good enough and then let those tissues develop. Like, these are the elite athletes you're seeing out here. It's like, how does this guy move like? Because he's been doing his whole life. So his tissues now have the resiliency and capacity, like from a biological, physiological standpoint, to handle these things, though it doesn't make sense.
It's funny as well because a lot of people, again, they get into this sort of model, they get a wide, and then they're like, okay, so therefore this is how I want to coach you to move. I'm like, no, we learn about all this stuff a lot of the time just so we can appreciate what they're going to do. And so that you can step back and because this is it, people like, oh, wide and narrow, there's more than just two buckets. I'm like, man, most sports that I've interacted with have one bucket, one way to fucking move. So going to a spectrum is actually much more diverse. And in weightlifting, there is one way to snatch and one way to clean and jerk, no matter what old coach you talk to. But when you see it out there, there's this spectrum again, every weightlifting coach will say, finish your pull. Triple extension is everything. So many weightlifters, just soft knees at the top of the pull. And it gets so obvious the advantage. It's just like you can get under the bar quicker. It's not a pulling the bar highest competition. It's pulling the bar high enough. It's like giving them more time to go under. It's just, God, it pisses me off.
We value your input here at the High Performance Podcast. Head to the SpeakPipe link in the notes below and you can leave us a voicemail where you can ask us a question or leave us a topic for us to explore on the show. We hope to hear from you soon.
Sorry, that was just a fucking rant, not a question. I want to talk about, you said bones are connective tissue on Instagram. I don't know when it was. And I think that's an interesting perspective as well. Like people think about bones as they're the stiffest tissue in our body. Therefore, they don't bend. Therefore, they don't twist. Therefore, they don't compress and expand. What do you think about that?
Actually, they all do that. And like, they're connective tissue calcium in, right? And that makes them hard. And that's all it is. Like it's one little element added. That's it. Everything else the same. And it makes it harder. So they bend, they absorb force. Like the piezoelectric effect, right? They vibrate. Right. So like you hit things, they move, like especially with kids, like you see with kids, they get stiffer as you get older, yes. But like they twist and bone, they twist and turn. They don't do it as much. Right. But over time they can. Like you'll see coxavera, coxavara, these are terms, right? This is from the bone changing shape. Right. You'll see like the rickets is a extreme version. That's a lack of deficiency, right? So we get the things, but like you see that they do turn and shit, like even though with the disease, but they still are acting under accordance of, oh, I've lost some integrity, so now I'm going to twist, but I'm still functional, right? But it's like you're going to have these things. You're hit, you compress. They're going to develop. They're going to change. But when you look at the bones, you look at older individuals, you can see like tibias that literally go from outside to in way more than they should. You can see as the knees, like it's not just the knee. You can see, like the femurs being a little bit more torqued. They're naturally twisted. One, they just follow the path of least resistance when they twist even more. But it's like they are utilized. They're the stiffest things possible. Like if I were to drop, other members are like this is like I want to say again a life thing. Like you have a bouncy ball, you can throw it, it bounces, right? But you also have like these steel balls that are just fucking stiff, and they bounce like crazy too. Like a golf ball bounces like crazy. It's super stiff, but if you look under, I think someone just posted on Instagram, which is pretty cool. It's going around this now. The shot of a golf ball into a wall, and you can see the form and come back. Yeah. It's like that stiff in your brain. It's never bends. Look at that. The bones are doing the exact same thing. They're compressing and then they're forcing things out. They're like a spring essentially, right? They load, but it's
otherwise
really
they just snap, right?
Otherwise
they just snap.
Yeah, because that's what would happen. Look at all the high. I mean, it happens. Like you see the people high jump. And like literally blow their shit up. It's not like, oh, bro, shit blows up. And it's like, why? Because like it got forced and then boom, like it just literally exploded because there's so much, but it didn't handle it. And the same thing, there's that video of the pitcher with a spiral fracture in his arm where he broke his arm throwing the ball. That was one of the wildest injuries though. That's crazy. He pitched and he threw, and on the recoil, it snapped and twisted out. But that's an extreme case. Like, but it did it that time because it was bending and it reached capacity. Right? The load over capacity.
Yeah. Because I think I see it in a lot of people where like, I think they get a lot of these really fucked skeletal shape changes when they're piss weak just to help them resist gravity. Like, I know there's other reasons
there's
as well.
A certain amount of strength. No. That like I have a post on that like from years ago too. Because like there's a certain amount of strength that required above the motion. Right? You have to have a certain amount of muscle mass. Otherwise, you use every conversation just to live. And that's what happens. Like, people
doing a 1RM against gravity.
If you're super fucking weak, it's like life hurts. Why? Because you're weak. You're malnourished. So, like, the PRI and all these other things, they're not going to help you because you just don't have enough strength yet to even hold yourself up. Yeah. Like, you need a base level of fitness and strength. Otherwise, none of this stuff is going to last for you. They may work for transient session because you are, once again, back at the beginning of this conversation, now we are no longer fighting gravity, running around with some pure exercises and breathing exercises, so you stand up, goes to shit because you're just weak. It's like you have to progress it. You have to have progressive overload. It's just doing it intelligently.
Yeah. Yeah, just finding the middle ground. Yeah. It's really hard to find people in the middle with a lot of this stuff, like just these models and identities. so polarized, like being a West Side coach, being a PRI guy. And because like even like West Side, like, I respect actual West Side and I respect actual PRI, but then the people that fall into these camps and identities. One time I consulted for a professional baseball team because the guy liked like what I talk about, because he's like, you see him in the middle. He's like, we had PRI guys running our S&C show. And he's like, and that didn't really work. Sorry, no, he's like, we had West Side guys. And he's like, and that didn't really work. Everyone was too stiff. And we threw that out. And then we went to PRI guys. But then like the athletes didn't like it. And I'm like, do you hear yourself? I'm like, get a middle guy or get someone who's not a guy.
Get a middle guy.
Get it.
That's where it is. Yeah, that's where it is. Like you have like, I do check, I do Paul check stuff, right? I do Pelican stuff. I do
check's a big one.
It's like, they all work until they don't, right? All these things have some form of usefulness, but it's like they all run their course if that's all you lean into, because the model is this is hyping up Bill and kind of what we do also with AMP is like the model isn't designed to, like Bill's model is, it gives you an understanding.
It's not prescriptive.
And that's what it is. It's not like, oh, you do this. It's like, I'm trying to help you understand the tools in your toolbox, why they work sometimes, why they don't. That's all it is. It's a better appreciation of human movement and physiological changes and adaptations. And that's all it is. So like, and people say, oh, the creative pressure, it fits everything. It just, and then people like who go, like people lean in, like Instagram can be short-sighted. You have how much time? You technically have a lot of time if you want to, because you could, but you don't want to, right? It's like, and it depends on the point. And it's like you can do that if you want to, but it's like you gotta understand if you just one hard sell, and you can have that stick, but like appreciate it doesn't matter there. And like most people, I don't care if they say whatever they say. It's like go talk to them first. If they say something, they'll probably have a better say. Like it's a business plan. It's advertising. So you're gonna say what you want to say to get people in. And it's not wrong. It's just not right all the time. Like that's where it comes down to. Like it's just not right all the time. And then people watch it and they're like, "Oh, this is godsend now," because I didn't get a chance to see these things or do these things. And so now it's like, "Oh, this person said this," but this is like you're hearing it from the third person down the line, and it's like, "Well, is that what they meant?" It's like, "Yeah, you meant it for that particular situation, but it wasn't an all-encompassing thing." Right? So like I look at it as middle line of where like there's value in a lot of things. There's value in a lot more things.
Most things.
A lot of value. Other things are like, yeah, that was kind of a waste of time. But I did pick up this one nugget, right? And so like it depends on what you take. And the key is like you can't go one side versus the other. It's just an appreciation of like, okay, why is this working? You gotta be curious. You gotta be curious.
Dude, even functional patterns.
You got a Ted Lasso speech.
Like, because I think functional patterns is like sort of stereotypically what a lot of coaches would point to as like, oh, what the hell is the good in all that nonsense? But I'm like, nah. If you're like a West Side guy, go do some spinny shit with the cable. And it's not, it won't work for why they say, but it's just like, it's just a good mix. It'll loosen you up a little bit. Like get a bit of transverse playing going.
Start to create a gradient. Yeah.
Functional patterns, guys. Let's do a box squat. Let's just do a hingy as fuck. Put it down your back. Throw some accommodating resistance on it. Like get some of that up here. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's what it is. It's just like, everything has a little spot. Like, and this is why they work. This is why these models are around because they work for somebody. Like, like the truth is, like, no matter what it is, it works for somebody, and it works for certain populations potentially better than others because of what they do is almost the opposite of what you're giving them. So it's like, oh, you're giving them a gradient. No, you're taking them out of the pattern they're in, right? You're giving them ability, like they're not like, but if you are giving the same thing constantly over and over again, then you start having issues because you just overload, right? And I've run into that personally with some of my training because I've gotten as I've gotten better at kind of being very pinpoint and describing, I can overload it because now the exercises they give, like they're so acute and so like focused. I could spend too much time on them. I put too much volume on one thing. I'm like, oh, I gotta change. I need to move. And it's like sometimes I can't do that. I've done that. I've gotten better at it, but I've done that in the past. But it's like the same idea is if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and just keep loading it, like, oh, I'm gonna keep loading the back squat and never make the change, right? No one ever plateaus. I don't give a shit who you are. But if you keep just putting weight on the bar, eventually your squat's gonna slip. You're gonna hurt yourself. Like you're gonna have to you gotta do like loop it, wave it, whatever you want to call it. Bring it back, restart it back over. It's like also 531 and pretty much every other lifting platform out there.
Yeah. Just to sort of round this conversation up. And I guess almost coming back to my first sort of question, and it's sort of just my thoughts on the takeaways. And I'd be curious to see what you think the explicit takeaways are, like practically for coaches. Because I encourage everyone who's listening to this, if anything that Greg or I have said has piqued your interest, it's like, go down the rabbit hole, go have a look at some PRI resources, go have a look at some Bill Hartman videos, or talk to some coaches about those ideas. But if I had to sum up some of the key concepts practically that have helped me a lot from appreciating whether it's PRI, breathing and gait, or compression expansion, is this idea that bones are the ultimate constraints for our movement a lot of the time. Probably not your ability to shorten or lengthen tissues. Mostly it just is, you're trying to anteriorly tilt a pelvis that's already anteriorly tilted. You can't go north from the North Pole. Another thing is proprioception, and why putting people on the ground helps. Again, some people are fighting for their lives just to resist gravity, or some people have no fucking clue where they are in space. So if they're touching something, they immediately know where they are in space. Also, that like a squat isn't just a squat is a squat, but a squat isn't just a squat. That if you tell a bunch of people to squat, you can see a million different things. But a lot of the time we're looking for a relatively specific thing when we prescribe a squat or any fucking movement. So that's why a lot of these compression expansion people get caught up on squatty squats, and a hinge is a fucking hinge for that fucking reason. Is there anything else like that these systems you think have given you an appreciation of on a purely practical level, or do you think that that's a relatively decent summary?
Summary, I think, the big thing as you get a sport, and like, I guess in rehab and life is like the appreciating the connective tissues and how they play a role. It's not just the muscles, right? And like you have the constraints of the bones and how they move, but then you have the connective tissues, again, which are bones, right? Of course, but it's like understand like how they're yielding and overcoming and how they're managing the forces. Are you getting store release? Are you just kind of dissipating that force throughout the system? Are you not allowing any forces? Like you're just constantly putting force on the ground, like, and you can't deal with it, so you have injury. So it's like appreciating how all the things you just mentioned also now affect the connective tissue, and how your training and rehab can help bias those things, and how that's such an important aspect of the rehab process, right? It's like appreciating those things, like, but and then because this is where all the nerves sit, right? This is where all the, like, your bones don't really have that sense, but like your connective tissues are like, oh, we're pulling on this, so therefore, I don't know where I am in space, right? It's like you have to get those to are they good at? Are they, when you put a little pressure on them, it's like, oh, fuck, I'm freaking out? Or is it enough where they can, I have wiggle room? That's all stretching is, right? You're affecting with connective tissues to the point where it's like either detrimental or good because of your sport that you play. This is why, you get the ACLs and the gymnasts because they overstretch. And like now they have like, you go back to the beginning, no reflexes, right? They don't know that it's not safe to go any further. So like, oh, we can go further. Like, no, you can't. And then, double ACL tear. Right? Because they've taken away their connective tissue's ability to sense the danger.
I think that's it as well. Just not just appreciating that it's all connective tissue, but having an appreciation for all tissue. Because that's definitely something that's in my head. It's just like, it's just muscle and bone. Or a lot of the time, honestly, just thinking about muscle. Once you sort of overcome the mobility limitations, it's like, no, like, and especially even just speaking to strength training, it's not just for muscles. Does amazing things for your bones, maybe some weird things as well at times, does amazing things for your tendons and ligaments and stuff like that as well. We're always training all of it. Fascia.
This is one more thing. But my idea is, like you say with the archetype, is if you ever skin an animal, I always say this, I think I say this every podcast, like you ever skin an animal, you ever harvest an animal, gone hunting, done that, been to the butcher shop, I advise you do it. The amount of weight that your internal organs carries is ridiculous. And so you have to be able to control those. And that's the big thing, is I'm saying with the breathing stuff, is like that lets you know kind of where you're going with your guts. Because if they don't go anywhere, good luck. Because those things are just they just fucking move around. And you gotta everything, you gotta handle it. And like they're massive. And it's like the appreciation of this, where like the other things you get from the strength training is like your ability to kind of move those guys
diaphragms
around
and the guts,
understand, like, if I can't bring them up, right? Exactly. Like I think that's a huge influence when it comes to like peak performance, in my opinion. Like that's where I'm looking at peak stuff. Is like, this is where I'm kind of peak now. Is heavy focus on that, or get things started. Like it's like on the ends of the spectrum. It's always in the mind, but like to really lock in to get someone's really jacked up, get those things moving, and then to really peak, it's like how well are they doing that? That's where the focus is now. Like how can I get those guts where I want them to go to jump that extra inch? Like it's like, where do I need to shoot them out to?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people sort of think about pelvic floor issues as just like incontinence. But it's like there's so much more to it than just stopping you from pissing and shitting yourself. I mean, if you've ever seen someone, Pat Davidson always talks about it. It's how I get out of the bottom of a heavy clean. You know, you just walk up to a basketball on the ground and you just start smacking it and it just starts bouncing and bouncing. And he was like, it's sort of like someone, they can't get the weight of their guts off the pelvic floor. So they're just trying to bounce it. And then in this moment where the guts are suspended in the air, you get this chance to ascend your pelvic floor a little bit easier. But it's funny, because it's like you bounce out of the hole rapidly and then just hit this fucking wall in the middle.
Right. It's like you say, you take a cup and you spin your stuff around, like your drink. It's like, why do you think most people pitch when you're pitching, you pitch farther out of a full windup versus a stride?
Yeah.
Because you're sloshing things around. It's like, zoom, right?
Guts
versus one step to go.
Throw you forward.
Yeah,
as well as your legs.
Getting it moving a lot sooner. It's like, there's like, and every step that you take, you technically unload to one side, then you move. Like research shows, like you get it moving first. Getting the guts moving, and it's to get that sucker sloshing around.
You were talking before about the timing effect, not of this, but I think it was something I was just like talking about just the timing of rotating different segments of your body. But it's another interesting timing concept. You've got the slosh that you got to time. And again, a lot of good athletes 100%. Do it innately, but providing them with opportunities to play around with that concept or
you can see it in force plates with vertical jumps. Because you have the double peak and the vertical jump. If you're good at it, the peak goes higher. Yeah. And that's your timing is very well with connective tissues. If it's not, or your guts. If you get the low peak, so like you get the big peak and then like the little peak and it goes below, that means your timing is probably a little bit off. And usually it's a configuration thing, but it's like, am I utilizing or is like it's kind of dampening my jump? And that's what you're looking at.
One last thing then, before I let you go. What do you think about the Pro Pulsers and the Pro Pulsar vests? Like, I hate thoughts questions, but what I'm thinking of and what I'm hoping you'll sort of refer to, sort of thinking about, like, this is a canister, right? Full of guts and shit, and it's sort of ricocheting around, shaking objects in your hands, canisters, shit ricocheting around, anything to that. I play around with it a bit. I don't know. I can't divorce it from holding little weights.
There's a timing thing to it. Like, it helps with the timing because for me to say,
because I was like, is it bad?
I've used water bags, I've used sand bags, I've used med balls. And it's the same idea, but it's like less to a certain extent. It's like, oh, can I get the timing down? Like, and you can fuck that up, right? You can just not have it right.
Just more noise.
But like, I think the timing thing is it's more like training, like, because like a water bag, same idea is like you're trying to, okay, how am I moving? How are things catching? How can I catch them and then reorder them, right? I don't know. I've never used those. So I have no idea what it feels like. I don't know. But like, if it's just like a rhythm thing, it essentially can help. Do you need them? I don't think you need them. I mean, you probably do a bunch of other things, but it may be something fun to play with. It gamifies it a little bit. But like for me, it's like, I don't know. Like I wouldn't say no, but I don't know if they're useful. But it makes sense in regards to they would help with training, but like from a physiological standpoint, it's probably more neural.
Yeah, the auditory feedback and just giving people something. Because I think as well, like a lot of people get a lot out of, when people just don't know what to do with their hands when they have nothing in them. So like you give them things to hold and then they just feel a bit more confident.
And that may make all the difference, right?
Especially
it's like
that's
helping everything else now. 100%.
You see Mark Bell getting back into running. Like I feel like he needs weights to feel safe.
100%. No, he's blessed Mark. Dude's a legend. I will give him that. And the fact that he's able to convert all the time, like how many pivots has this man made? And like he's able to do it even at his age. Like it's super impressive. Maybe a little help on the side, you know what I'm saying? On the pharmacy. But like he's killing it, dude. Like he's I love how he stays relevant. And again, he does it. You can't disrespect him because he does what he talks about. So
I love seeing it.
And he could be very useful because his running, I've seen it. I'm like, damn, that looks like it hurts. Because I sometimes have my knee surgeries that I understand. So
he's an absolute beast. And so are you, Greg. Thank you so much for giving up your time. Is it still Friday there? It's late Friday night. Sorry if I've kept you up.
It's on Friday evening. Yeah, somebody eat some dinner. It's like 7:30.
Oh, nice. Well, I hope you have an amazing Friday. But for anyone whose interest you've sparked, like, I need to learn more about this, or who they just love the way that you talk about human movement and training, where can they find you? Where are you putting out content? Do you have any courses or anything coming up?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm on Thorne Training and Therapy on Instagram, and then one step away is my basketball account. So that's where it's just kind of just local only, but we're going to start posting some more things. It's going to help with. It's going to be kid based mostly. So if you have children and you look for that, that's where we're going to be at. From an education standpoint, I work with the ANT mentorship and Blueprint, and through Sean Astorga and Fractal Biomechanics, Encore, and we essentially from there we help people better utilize the skills they already have. Right, we give them a better understanding of what they're doing and how they can pinpoint their strategies a little bit better. And then
it's not
also
just nothing.
I've missed this many times, huh?
It's not just the classic, you know nothing, here's the new set of rules.
Yeah, 100%. Like, why do you do? Oh, like, yeah, usually it's like, what do you do now? Did it work? Then why would you do it differently? Do you know why it worked? Okay, here's why it worked. And it's like, that's literally that's how I teach it. It's like, this is why it probably worked. And I don't know everything, but, the key is like appreciating why things work. And then also, again, I can't not knock, again, things all the time we talk about where it strongly influenced my build, and we talk about PR ad nauseum, so I can talk about that. But now we'll bring up the UHP model, and I do recommend people get in there. There's a free version of it. Jump in there, see if you like it. And then if you don't, if you do, you can go a lot deeper. Like, trust me, there's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down to, and the people in the community are very good at talking about, because they want to talk about, they want to learn as well. The same with AMP. Again, our community continues to grow. And you have access to the community all the time. So I do recommend, obviously, working with us. But at the same time, we've learned Bill mentored us a lot. So we get a lot of our influence from Bill and how we view things.
There you go, everyone. Go jump down the rabbit hole.
If you're sick of going goblin mode on the same 4 accessory exercises at the end of every single session, head to the notes below and grab our free gymnastics program. It'll change the way you think about accessories forever.